some interesting events happened during the month of October. So about 25th of October, there was the announcement of a mammoth highways and road construction project. About 84,000 kilometers of road and highways at a cost of about 7 lakh crore would be implemented by 2022. A few days before that, we had $1 billion investment by the Abu Dhabi Investment Authority in the National Investment and Insurance Fund that was set up by the Government of India. Much more recently, I would say a couple of days back, India's ranking in the ease of business went from 130 to 100, so about 30 places improvement. There were other areas where India's ranking has improved. Global competitiveness has gone from 55 to 40 over 2 years. Logistics performance has gone from 54 to 35. All of these facts are facts that we presented during the Dun & Bradstreet Infra Awards in 2017, during November the 2nd. These facts are important because they capture a couple of things that are very key to infrastructure. Number one, a lot of these investments are massive. You cannot make impact on infrastructure without significant investments. And secondly, a lot of the progress is slow. It's slow and steady, but you need to keep capturing data to know how you're measuring it. So at Dun & Bradstreet, we keep tracking what are the facts to measure progress in areas that we need to be tracking improvement. One really good way to measure it is to compare ourselves with countries that are like we would like to be when it comes to infrastructure. Also with countries that are at approximately our levels of investment. So some of the countries that are in the category of where we would like to be are the US, UK, France, Germany, Japan, Canada. And there are other countries that are roughly where India is, certainly where India needs to compare itself in terms of infrastructure. These are countries like Russia, South Africa, Brazil, Mexico, Indonesia, China. So at Dun & Bradstreet, we've actually looked at how they compare on a chart that maps GDP per capita with an index that captures availability and quality of infrastructure. So what do we mean by availability and quality of infrastructure? Well, we capture exactly the kind of things that you think of, right? So it includes roads, power, airports, sanitation, ports, railway, telecom, and it also captures certain nuances like what percent of power is coming from renewable energy. Now, what comes out when you look at that chart is, firstly, there's a very strong correlation. As GDP per capita goes up, so does quality of infrastructure. When you map these countries, they are roughly on a straight line. The second thing is that actually India doesn't look great. Out of the countries that I've mentioned, India is either the lowest or the second lowest on all the parameters. So that's a slightly sobering conclusion, right? So let's quantify what that means. A very good way to quantify it is, if you are a resident of one of these countries, roughly what is the annual spending per capita or the annual investment in infrastructure that an individual enjoys? So what we've done is we've looked at the pool of countries that are what we call the top 6 in terms of infrastructure and compared that to India. So the top 6 again are US, UK, France, Canada, Japan, and Germany. So here's what we find. In this pool of countries, approximately $1,200 goes on average in infrastructure investment every year. Compared with that, India is about 1/10. And as you'd expect, that translates into real and tangible implications for residents in those countries versus India. So some obvious things: access to drinking water, access to electricity, share of paved roads, right? So share of paved roads, for example, 61% compared with 100% in the pool of top countries. Share of access to sanitation facilities is about 40% for India and about 100% for these countries. If you went to the other end of the spectrum, airports, on average, India has one airport per 100,000 square kilometers. These countries have 6 airports. So in all these characteristics, India is about 1/10, 1/6, or at best 40% of most of the metrics. Now, why does that matter, right? So one thing that we hear very often, these are often quoted because they're very eye-catching. Oh, well, we have so many people who have access to a mobile phone, but they don't have access to a toilet. So why is there such a focus on sanitation, toilet, clean water? Well, that's actually because of very sound economic reasons. There are very close correlations between what needs to go into provision of, say, sanitation facilities and clean water facilities, because a country needs to get to a certain level of economic growth as well as a certain level of political will to lay the entire infrastructure that goes to delivering clean water to its citizens. So, and there are some very important economic implications. So just as an example, there was a WHO study that said that for every $1 of investment that goes into sanitation, you have between $4 and $5 of return that comes out of health and productivity gains. There was a UN study that actually went further. It said that for developing markets like India, for every $1 of investment in sanitation and water, there are $9 of return that come from a variety of sources. It comes out of direct and indirect health. It comes out of deaths avoided, productivity enhanced, water supply protected, and much wider benefits like more productive investments that come out of education. Because due to health and sanitation problems, if children are not attending school, they lose out on the education investment that's already made, right? So all of that counts for the quantity of infrastructure that India is able to deploy. And just like water, just like sanitation, there is a story behind the numbers when it comes to airports, ports, road, paved roads, electricity, and so on. So that's quantity of infrastructure. If you then look at quality of infrastructure, the story is a little bit more nuanced. So recently, Niti Aayog asked Dun & Bradstreet to do a piece of work for them. It was a study on the wider trade logistics index. And in specific, they asked us to look more closely at ports in India, the port sector. Now, specifically, one thing they were interested in a country like India, if you actually used various forms of freight transport in the way that was most efficient, most cost effective, and best for the environment, you would have ports above all else. Then you'd have rail, and then you'd have road. In actual fact, India has the exact opposite. In fact, ports account for about 6% of the relevant freight movement that happens in India. And why is that? Well, it's for the reasons that we all recognize as Indians. It's because of congestion, it's because of pollution, it's because of wastage. All of that is the consequence of not using ports but using roads and rail more than ports. And why are ports not being used? For the reasons again that we would recognize. It's because of variable processes, variable costs, variable timing, variable technologies that are used in various ports. So clearly it's an area that needs to significantly improve. So this is an example of quality of infrastructure. So what we've then done as Dun & Bradstreet is we have mapped all the countries on another chart that represents the infrastructure investment as a percentage of GDP and the availability and quality of infrastructure. And what you find is it's like 4 quadrants, right? At the top left, what you have is high quality with relatively low investment. Not surprising, all the top countries come in there. France, Germany, US, UK, Canada. It's exactly what you'd expect. They're on the top left. At the bottom right is where India sits. So we're making big investments in infrastructure, but quality is relatively low. And it's because a lot of the investments, let's say electricity, is lost in transmission or stolen. A lot of investments are in the form of roads rather than other forms of transport. So not only do we have a lot to do in terms of quantity of infrastructure, but we also struggle in terms of quality. So all of this tells us there's a long journey that we have to travel. Fortunately, we have several things going for us. We have a government that is not afraid to operate with courageous integrity, unafraid of significant investment, and sometimes investment that is not visible in the short term. We have reasonably good corporate leadership when it comes to the infrastructure companies, and we have all the things going for us in terms of the growth of the overall economy. So as far as I would say, from the studies that Dun & Bradstreet have done, we're on the right path, but the road ahead is pretty long. Thanks very much.